We're good? This is Asia Tech Podcast. My name is Graham Brown. We are in the Startup O headquarters in Singapore. I'm joined by two esteemed guests, the partners, the founders of Startup O. Sitting around the table here, a familiar face, Anuj.
Hi,
good
Graham.
to see you. Welcome.
Very good to see you. Welcome to our office.
Yeah, Anuj Jain. If you don't know this guy, you'll know the name. I think when we'll come to the context of the awards, it's like everybody knows you. So I think it's a good thing in the context of the startup ecosystem. So we'll talk a little bit about your background and also Startup O as well. So we'll go there. But also over here, first time that we've met, Nitin.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, welcome.
And it's a pleasure, Graham.
Yeah, it's good to meet you as well. So the common connection here is you're both from Delhi.
Absolutely.
Did you know each other before?
No, we met in Singapore actually around 2002
Right.
when we came to Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've been in Singapore for how many years?
Both of us are. We landed in 2002, I think.
Okay. So what was the reason for you both coming to Singapore? How did that happen?
I think we hung out at the same bars when we first met, but I think we came due to different paths.
Right.
I moved here with my then employer, which was a bank that moved me from Hong Kong to Singapore.
Right.
And I think, Anuj, you were moving from Delhi, right? So
Yeah, I was also moving from Delhi, and I moved for a very peculiar reason. And I think 9/11 at that time was pretty instrumental because one of the companies that I was building under Wipro,
Right.
one of the first ISPs and all, they closed down after the 9/11 shifts in corporate structures. And my wife was having a project here, so I just landed for 3-4 months of break and roaming around. And then it happened, so the serendipity played a part and, landed into starting a business here at that time.
Right. So the plan wasn't actually to come and move here. You were just going to come and check it out.
The plan was not to move here.
Yeah.
The plan was just to,
18 years later.
Yeah, and then you just, one thing lead to another. And,
Yeah.
and Singapore had been very kind and very inspiring for our journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially doing what you do as an ecosystem, as a place to connect with people. It's
Absolutely.
fantastic. I mean, I moved here for a similar reason. You want to be surrounded
Yeah.
by like-minded people,
Absolutely.
right? Whether it's investors or startup founders. It's not the cheapest place in the world to bootstrap a startup, but if you want access to capital and a certain type of startup founder, it's all here, right? And it's a vantage point as well for the rest
But
of
I
Asia.
tell a lot of entrepreneurs who always say that it's a very costly place to start a business, and it is, no doubt about it. But tell me another country where you can have 8 to 10 meetings back to back.
Yeah.
And the productivity is up the wazoo. And I mean, you go to Bangkok or Mumbai or Jakarta, after 2 meetings, you're just done.
You can do one a day in Jakarta. It's 5 hours across town.
So
right?
Nitin and I discuss over, many discussions that whatever we have created in the last 3 years at Startup would have taken at least 5 to 6 if we were in any other place.
Yeah.
So
think of the
Singapore-
cost, yeah.
Absolutely.
So you started Startup O 3 years ago.
Right.
What was the genesis of? Can you tell us who pitched who? Was it over a beer? Was it in a bar? What was the idea? Who came up with the idea?
Well, if you want to go ahead.
No, I think you should. You got this.
No, so this whole thing was what we're proud of. It's built from the first principles, and it's built from our individual journeys. What we have looked into it, we have not, looked into a model somewhere else and thought, okay, let's also do it. It's pretty cool to do this. But just a little bit background about myself. After spending almost 20 years in FMCG companies like Procter & Gamble, GSK, Wipro, and then I was since last many years in Asia, working as a head of marketing for BIC, which is a French-American company, and that allowed me to learn a lot about markets and go-to-market in building businesses, products, channels, right from markets like Japan to Jakarta. So had a great experience at that doing that. But at the same time, when I was bitten by the bug of possibilities in the new world, I made a transition from the world of pipelines to platforms around 2012 end, and created my own startup. And much like many corporate dropouts, did all the mistakes that were possible. But I think this ecosystem was very kind to me. At the same time, I learned by walking the walk, pains that founders go through. It's not about sometimes what you're doing or what you're creating, but who you know is more important. And 80% of your time is wasted as a founder by schmoozing, networking, and not focusing on what we learned in the traditional industry. Focus on the product, customer, and on your team. but your time was going completely odd. So that learning kind of stayed with me. At the same time, the ecosystem was kind, and I got involved with the branded VC to scale one of their F&B SaaS company in Southeast Asia that allowed me to transition and actually successfully scale to some extent and that venture, where I learned that it's not about the tech, but it's about the commercialization aspect of this that works quite fine. But also on the weekends, I was pretty blessed to have worked very closely with 160 plus founders that I trained through a structured boot camp over 3 year period. And those weekends were very special for me, where I really learned not only that founders are having this problem, but investors are finding this ecosystem very opaque to access who are the promising ones. So the problem is not one-sided, which is generally a myth. It's also investors are not finding, they have a lot of availability bias, where they are, who they know, the same thing, right? The industry is very opaque. It's not available in the listed market, for example. So when we looked at it, this whole vision of a platform approach, where not only the founders get a very fair chance, and these are, I'm talking about authentic founders, skin in the game, creating great solutions, they need to, have a way to prove themselves to maybe other entrepreneurs who understand it better, but also for investors to have a more transparent and an objective way to build a portfolio in this asset class, which is usually expressed through random sharpshooting as an angel investor, or even family offices and institutions we are seeing have the similar problem. So this vision was there. It came out of real experience working as a founder, training founders, investing, and scaling companies. And then at that point of time when I was going around, I met my dear friend Nitin, who is a prolific investor himself, and a go-to guy for advice on entrepreneurship and especially in fintech space. I let him speak about it at that time when I was just thinking broad in terms of the whole vision and the pain and the process that's required. He really helped me guide and shape the whole platform thinking to the next level. So instead of investing into this, I said, why don't we join hands and let's build it together? And that's how the journey began.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
I love the fact that the way you talk about the story is that there's this real, you understand what's broken in the industry. You understand that there is a marketplace here, that you've got people on either side of the marketplace. And interestingly as well, I'd like to explore that a little bit. It's not a one-sided problem.
It's not,
I mean, the way things are set up, I mean, we look at, for example, how people envisage like pitch competitions, and it tends to be a one-sided problem. But most early stage investors, I suppose, we're dealing with individuals and angels to an extent, are individuals, and they spend a lot of money joining angel networks.
Correct.
And, we can have a discussion about that as well in terms of return on their investment. But I think they're all trying to seek out resources and access to information that they don't have because they're individuals. Not all of them do it full time as well. Yeah. And a lot of them do it quite emotionally.
Absolutely.
Like, I believe in you and your startup and I want to back you. Show me the pitch deck, right? Which is really sort of the logical post-rationalization of it. But I guess the challenge is that, they need those resources and they don't have them. There's nothing out there.
Absolutely.
So I like the fact that you sort of positioned it as a two-way problem rather than just it's a problem with startups pitching in the old sort of going to your bank for a loan style model. We're not there, right? So you started this 3 years ago.
Right.
And how did you get that started? Did you go back to where did you start? Did you go to the investors? Did you go to the startups? How did you get this thing moving? Because you're building a platform. Right. You need both sides of the model to make it work, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, Graham, I think one thing that was very clear to us was, like you said, we need both sides at some level. And, what we didn't want to sort of go down the path of is becoming a bit of a crowdfunding marketplace or something like that. What we felt was that if we could, create a strong enough process for being able to assess the startups, right? And that's really where we felt there was the bottleneck was, because if you look at the industry as a whole, right? The number of new launches is proliferating. Right? The cost of launching a new company has fallen to all-time lows. More and more corporate dropouts are, leaving their desk jobs and, becoming entrepreneurs. And there's a huge new entry of startups happening every year, right? Parallelly, the number of people that want to access this marketplace, even institutions, has grown, right? And more capital is also flowing into this. But the pinch point was the allocators. And if you think about the traditional problem of a seed stage allocator, it's always really been capacity. You tend to be a specialist in artificial intelligence, or a specialist in IoT, or a specialist in agri-tech, and then you have a 3 or 4 man team that can sort of help you figure out enough early stage opportunities. But then sometimes you can become a victim of your own success.
Yeah.
If somebody takes you from a $20 million pocket to a $200 million pocket, it's not as if you can get 10 times the number of qualified resources to be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
So we felt that this allocation point was pinched, and therefore curation was the problem. And so we first went out, and while we were talking to potential investors and we were talking to startups, we had to put down a methodology of how to transparently, data-driven fashion, rank or curate these startups. But once you have that, that curation engine in place, then both effects start sort of accelerating, because a startup gets a when they interact with our curation process, they get a very clear idea as to why they didn't get the money, and that's a big difference.
Right. So you're closing the feedback loop.
We're closing the feedback loop for them,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah.
Parallelly, because each time because we created a process which was algorithmic and data driven, but where the inputs were coming from experienced entrepreneurs themselves, i.e. qualitative inputs were first becoming quantitative, and then the algos were working. The investors also got enough comfort that this is something that has been cross-referenced across a whole cohort of people, and not one investment at a time.
Yeah.
So I think the ability for investors and institutional investors now to start looking at this seriously emerged from the fact that we were not going after absolute ratings. We had a process, and we had like a relative rating, right? We had the curve, we sliced off the right tail, and that was what was on offer for the investors.
We are like the Morningstar ratings for startups, if you may.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a very high integrity product where these startups, each startup that is selected, and the selection is also very institutional. We have now 20 plus institutional partners from 15 different countries. So it's a very diversified funnel at the top itself, which is further pre-curated in the local markets. And the networks of experts who are seasoned entrepreneurs and domain experts, they themselves are pretty active and known people in their little universes physically, right? It's a very fragmented geography. So the deal flow that comes are already kind of pre-curated, and then we further filter it down based on do they have early revenues or signs of strong traction or a significantly different idea with some good teams, and allow roughly 60 to 75 companies to participate. And now, mind you, that at the entrance or the starting line itself, these companies are pretty strong. They're authentic entrepreneurs with skin in the game, created something, having 2 to 3 years of play already done, and they have playbooks, early playbooks, but still they're in the death valley where they need capital and they need networks to amplify themselves or to replicate their playbooks. That's a perfect stage where Startup O as a platform and the networks that we have can really help these entrepreneurs. And that's how what Nitin mentioned about a very structured process, which is a high integrity process, because neither Nitin nor me or anybody from our team actually contaminate with our biases and our limitations during the process is going on. We, as a venture capital, only meet the top, or interact with the top 10 output of the high merit companies, but they had a fair chance to prove themselves to the other entrepreneurs who have walked the walk before. So this is the process, and then the venture capital part starts, where the legal, financial diligence and personal founder interactions take place from the IC side, and basically make investments. So it's a systematic investing in high traction startups proposition by blending art and science. The art is important in early stage because you need a lot of know-how and experience, which all the experts and the entrepreneurs bring to the platform, and the science of algorithms, as Nitin mentioned, which is a very, very interesting data-driven process. And finally, we don't leave at allocation of capital because we get involved with the same network, to mobilize behind these high-ranked companies to build these ventures, to open doors for them, and in a manner where everybody's incentives are aligned. So there's something which is the whole value chain approach versus just point-in-time sharp shooting. To your earlier point that angel investors with their true expressions to get involved, But because of the availability bias and opacity in the universe and lack of information, even if they have these portfolios, but they don't have either the rights or wherewithal to help them grow, and then 90% of so-called myth is that your money will be wasted, is something of a myth, because there is an art and science of doing it, but people don't know about it.
Yeah. And how important that is. You mentioned it as well, Nitin, about being a victim of success. That, if you're a successful entrepreneur and you've had an exit, you think what makes a successful exit. You may have the art, but even I find this myself as an entrepreneur, is that I'm constantly checking my own blind spots. Even if it's a small thing, like looking at marketing data or saying, I think this would work.
Right.
And then you find out that was a completely, the dumb thing to do, but the data is challenging you, right? And that's the challenge, I guess, is if you're new and you're starting out, then you've got to have it's a blank slate. You've got to absorb everything. If you're successful, 20 years under your belt, there's that little bit of a tendency. And this, when you look at angel investors, this is the challenge, isn't it? It's that they can walk in and then this 90% failure becomes a reality, right? Because they're just investing on sample bias or, the availability bias or from here.
Right.
But the good and the bad news is it's not only angel investors. Even family offices, we're meeting many family offices have the same problem. They don't know this particular space, especially in Asia, which is an evolving ecosystem. And hence, I think what we're discussing is very relevant from investing in this tech asset class point of view as well. But you had a point, Nitin, earlier. We were discussing about the bias elimination aspect that we had, designed into the whole thing.
That's right. I mean, the natural tendency, I think, for all of us as at the early stage is to sort of, be a little overwhelmed by the number of moving parts that could go right or could go wrong in a company, right? And then it's just natural human instinct to then sort of, potentially on the back of prior experiences or sometimes just randomly or based on what you read yesterday, just find that one thing to hang a hat on, right? Is this technology defensible? Is the founder fantastic? Is the market huge? Is this problem a big one, right? And what we realized was that, while something like that in very well trodden ecosystems, developed ecosystems can potentially work. I mean, like if I've done 3 AI companies and now I'm an angel investor in AI, it's perfectly all right for this bias to be amplified, right? Yeah. That's what top VCs are doing. That's what, perhaps some platforms like AngelList can afford to do because they've got some, very experienced entrepreneurs do this. But Asia isn't that mature a place yet. Right, so here it's not a lot of the technology companies haven't even exited, right? So otherwise they'd be available on the listed markets. But so over here there is this disconnect between the people who have money and are investing actively, and the value or the insight embedded in that investment activity with respect to technology company valuation.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. A lot of the money here has come from traditional sectors and
family offices.
Exactly. And so if you just follow a leader-follower approach in these ecosystems, you can sometimes have a blind leading blind effect, or at least expose yourself to that risk.
Right. When we look at where we are in Singapore, it's quite a unique ecosystem in the fact that we have talent from all over the world coming here. Yourselves included, obviously, as a good example, right?
And you.
And myself. Let's pat ourselves on the back. Yeah. But it's a great example. If you've got a lot of different opinions coming into Singapore, and it's always been one of those issues leveled. And when they talk about Singapore, is that sort of lack of local entrepreneurial hustle as well. And, that Singapore, there's a lot of MNCs here. Why go to Singapore and start a startup? Why does this make a good place for a startup founder when I can go and bootstrap a startup in Chiang Mai or Bali, for example? And people do, right? Why is this a good place to come and, and it is an expensive place to start a startup and, build a head office here, right?
Right.
What is good about Singapore? Why are you here? And why is this a place that we should watch? I mean, because bear in mind that people watching this and listening are outside of Asia as well. So, what is it about Singapore, given that the context of the conversation that we're still, we are sort of learning here in Singapore. We're behind the curve a little bit. So,
So I can sort of speak to one effect that we've seen over here, and that is the nature of this corporate dropout, based startup, right? I mean, you may be right that this isn't the place where you can just launch a social media product and get millions of users overnight and things like that. But remember, this has been a huge center for pooling of talent by large companies world over, right? And when some of these people step out of their jobs and set up companies in Singapore, they have some amazing advantages, right? All the efficiencies that we spoke about before, access to technology, and most importantly, knowledge of pain points in large companies,
Absolutely.
operations.
Yeah.
So the breed of startup that Singapore is really good at developing are, the small companies, they need $4 or $5 million to become like $20 or $30 top line companies. None of them need to necessarily become $500 million top line in 3 years, right?
They're not changing the world, are they? They're fixing a problem.
They're fixing a problem, right?
Yeah.
And that particular segment is again something that Startup does very well with.
Right,
Because
so you're saying that's something you find here in
We
Spain
find that
and in
here,
Singapore.
yeah,
It's-
exactly.
okay. Corporate dropouts. It sounds like you're speaking in the pejorative, like dropout in the negative. So
No, because we are
ourselves corporate dropouts,
So
right?
let's sort of put that on the
I think-
table.
yeah.
And also, I think it emanated from the fact that startup world for a very long time is associated with college dropouts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the world is finally changing and for good. But
Right.
whenever we talk about that, okay, we are in, we have a thesis of systematic investing in high traction startups. The visual image that we realize that we're going to say a lot of family office mind, oh, there must be young kids.
Yep.
There's a particular persona around
right.
it. There are young kids,
Stanford
they stand for
dropouts.
dropouts,
Yeah.
and they're creating some cool app and all this stuff, which is totally wrong.
Yeah.
Now we see so many interesting, professionals, PhDs. They're guys who have amazing domain expertise, and they have unfair advantage which we don't realize that is going to be very useful for their survivability. They have certain savings already built in. They have network, which is a very big effect in any of the businesses, as we all know in our entrepreneurial journey. And also beyond that, they have a domain expertise, much to the point that Nitin was making earlier. You're fixing a problem which you are passionate about, which you have a knowledge about, and you're not just creating another delivery app or a pizza app, which is the experience of a lot of college dropouts. Nothing wrong with that. But there is this also the center of corporate excellence, and times are changing. The macro factors are moving out. And to be very frank, even when I used to teach, I used to say this is the best time to be alive because you can, for the first time, don't have to marry, a rich girl with a rich father-in-law to create a business or take a loan from the bank.
Yeah.
But you can create what you want to do. So that's one. But talking about the same point, if you look at the management framework, it's suddenly coming back to me. There was something called PEST, which is like political, economic, social, and technology. What's the macro thesis on that? If you see the political will here on technology, enabling technology startups or even going for IP-rich companies is amazing.
Yeah.
We don't
Without
see
doubt.
that
Yeah.
in many of the other countries who are trying to ape the same model, which is good. But Singapore government, and we work very closely with Enterprise Singapore, we work closely with A-Star, and we see the willingness of people to work with partners like us is just amazing to get the feedback. On economic front, Southeast Asia is a macro thesis that Nitin and I talk about many times. This is the best time to be in Southeast Asia, and Singapore is the hub. If you have to set up a startup and capture not only your local market but the whole region, this is the best place to come and actually work with the whole ecosystem play. Social, melting pot of different cultures. We are sitting in this room, you're coming from Japan, we came from Delhi, and we've traveled all over in the world and all this stuff. So this is very important. Accessing talent. I've seen people had gone to low-cost locations, and either lack of ecosystem or lack of talent takes equal amount of time, apart from the productivity things that we discussed. And finally, technology. What is technology? It is infrastructure. It allows you to, move so fast. Everything works. That's a big thing. And we come from India, and a lot of entrepreneurs that we speak all the time, they're like closing a company, opening a company, getting a thing done. And these things are not counted.
Yeah.
They're not escalated in media, but that's very important in entrepreneurial
Yeah.
life. I would highly encourage, and even with a recent announcement of entry pass through partners like ourselves, a few partners are being allowed. This is a huge move to get the talent into Singapore and providing entrepreneur pass to them to prove that they can create a entity, and it eases out, even the visa issues and other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a fantastic
Yeah.
place.
Where else in the world can you land at the airport and
Exactly.
be home in 20 minutes?
Exactly.
I know.
I mean,
Exactly right.
that is really indicative of what, I don't want to promise too much, but,
Yeah.
have it, obviously, Delhi Airport, gone through Heathrow many times.
Yeah.
So I think we get an understanding that as an entrepreneur is that you want that frictionless experience, and how much energy that takes
Yeah,
away
absolutely
when you're
right.
dealing with that stuff, right?
Correct.
And you just want to get on, and building a business as it is tough, right?
Yeah.
It ain't easy. So you don't want these sort of extras thrown in, like visa issues and
Oh my God.
airport technologies, right? All right, so on to the main billing of why we're here. Let's talk about networks, because recently we had an award. We had a vote for the ecosystem builders around Asia. So really sort of continuing the conversation about the Asian startup ecosystem and who is out there, because we do celebrate the startups a lot. They are the stars, right? They are, the poster child of the startup ecosystem. Yet behind the startups, there are a group of people like yourselves, and they could be funds, they could be accelerators, government programs, even co-working spaces, who are very proactive in supporting the startups, right? And they're not natural self-promoters, right? And they're not out there promoting what they do, yet if it wasn't for them, those startups wouldn't be where they are today, right? So we had an award to shine a spotlight on those ecosystem builders. And in that award, Startup O, they were nominated first. That's part of the story. But it was a fair competition. I think there was a lot of healthy competition. And obviously, you are very close to many of the other nominations that got in the top 5, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And we work in
Metatron,
collaborate.
We work with them.
La French Tech as well, very well. So I think it's all good. A bit of healthy competition as well. But let's talk about the result. Oh, before we talk about the result, let's talk about how you got to the result. How did you guys hustle that vote? How did you get, we'll talk about the numbers in a minute, but the top line, obviously the numbers, but you got 19% of all the votes.
Wow.
How many votes did we get? About 9,000, was it? We're not just talking about a few hundred people. And these, people who are busy, this like Saturday morning, it was Sunday morning, like 6, 7 in the morning, people were voting in numbers all the way up until close. How did you guys hustle that? So what was the story? What was the secret?
Anuj is the guy who sort of,
So I think, it was, so I was in the control room, yes, but it was not about me. I wish I had a click farm where I could do it myself. But I think it was, and Graham, we got nominated, then we, ranked up a bit here and there, but we were not into the game at that point of time. But when we realized that our community, people are messaging and, they're coming around, then you get motivated also to galvanize the whole community. It was a great opportunity to, and as you know, Startup O is an ecosystem on a cloud. We have multiple countries, many experts, founder community, as well as institutional partners who are all part of this, vision that we are executing. So we had a very famous saying in our presentation. We're saying it took a village to raise a child. And we were so much in gratitude all the time for all the people who had helped us what Startup O is. And that was a great opportunity, and thanks to you, to galvanize this community. And we realized that people were like, oh my God, I want to participate, I want to contribute. And of course, we had to hustle. Frankly, we didn't go out physically anywhere or ask for votes. It was totally, we have an engaged community, let's just say that, right? So it was all on WhatsApp and request and just telling them that, hey, this is something that we have done. If you feel that, and you're part of the community as well. So I think the first 800, 900 votes, frankly, when we were tracking was from purely our community. And then the last moments when we realized that our very worthy competitor, Betatron, who are also now our partner or becoming a partner, and they're pretty strong. So they were playing around the game. Then we thought, okay, let's appeal on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and we say, okay, let's But our approach was always, we are very proud of what we have done. We have been very undercover. We have never shouted out loud. We were always highlighting companies we're investing in. But this was an opportunity to tell them we did this. People knew about it peripherally, But then for the first time we came out and another gentleman is just coming after this interview, and he calls himself almost a co-founder, and he is one of the main guys in IP Bridge, which is a Japanese government fund. He gave a shout out, and so many other people, who gave a shout out for us on their social media. So I think it was so beautiful to feel that loved.
Absolutely.
That love.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It was a network of networks
It
effect
was
by the end of it. But,
And I think, as we say, that Startup O is also, we wear a VC suit, but our DNA is a venture builder, and we have a community at heart. So it's not about this or that, but we have kind of, an approach which is very community driven. And one of the failures, if you have to ask, in the last 3 years that we sometimes discussed, Nitin and I, and we're working on it, is that we wanted to help even many more authentic entrepreneurs, and we are not able to engage because sheer bandwidth and resources that are required. We have identified solid entrepreneurs, but we couldn't engage the way we wanted to that extent. And now we are creating a structured alumni program to keep in touch with all these authentic entrepreneurs and bring them back and connect them even with other funds and with other investors beyond our own fund. So that's the approach. I think people like it because we're bringing transparency, and I think we're very honest and everybody's incentives are aligned. And this is what I learned from Nitin, especially how to design and align the incentives so that everybody contributes, in the most fair manner.
Yeah, and the results showed. I mean, it's 1,364 votes. If you think about it, that's 1,364 people. People are busy. They could be doing other things with their family or whatever. They could be doing their shopping. But to take the time to register, to vote, it's a good validation of everything that you said. And, I think at the end of the day, you talked about, in terms we don't often hear people talk about startups, it's beautiful, love and so on. But these are people's lives as well. As a startup founder, when you've got somebody who's got your back and supporting you, it's somebody's life that you're involved with, and you're part of that journey as well. And 1,364 votes is a good validation of that impact that you're having on people. So
Nitin, I think we have to say a big thank you to everyone.
Yes, thank you very much. Humbled.
It wouldn't be possible. It was absolutely.
And it was nearly not possible because the last over, I think, really was that you came through. So.
I still remember last 2 hours of the blind voting session where we didn't know who's going up and down, and people that was close to midnight on a weekend, and I think they voted almost 250, 300 votes in that time. So a big thank you, and we are always going to be there for the whole community. So please feel free to reach out anytime. Yeah.
Awesome. And with that, it is now time to give you the award. So
drum roll.
It is a drum roll, and I will present you. And here we have the award for Outstanding Contribution to the Startup Ecosystem in Asia 2019. Presenting to, I'm going to give it to you, Anuj, because you're the closest. Startup her. There you go. Let's get it on the camera.
Yes,
Can we get it on the camera?
I think here.
There you go. We'll have to do one camera, not even between. There you go.
I'll just come
so
here.
in true startup style.
There we go.
There you go. Well done, guys. I think it well worked and thoroughly deserved.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that was a lot of fun. But I think there's a serious message behind the fun as well. It's like, anybody that can mobilize a network says something, right? When we get the startups on and we do the startup specific award, it's a real validation of that startup. You can have a great product, but if people don't believe in you, then it says a lot, right? And if you can get a network of thousands of people to get out and vote for you, it says something as well. So,
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for sharing your stories with us on Asia Tech Podcast, and thank you for your time in mobilizing your network. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully, for next year's awards, you'll be there again, and you'll be more prepared this time with everybody. So everybody will be in. There'll be more competition this time.
I will take a poll of all the community whether they want to vote again on a weekend or not.
That's right. Yeah,
absolutely.
But thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you guys. And so this is Asia Tech Podcast, Graham Brown with Nitin and Anuj from Startup O, and we'll put your details in the show notes. Obviously, everybody here knows you who voted for you, but there's a lot of people who are curious about what you do and the conversation that we had. People may want to reach out. So
absolutely.
The easiest way is just to maybe through LinkedIn, just say hi, listen to your podcast, watched it on YouTube and so on. So really interested in what you're doing. Let's connect.
Absolutely. Thank you
forward to
very
that.
much, Graham. Again,
Thanks, Graham.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye-bye.